The story begins in a post-apocalyptic future, where rebels are trying to overthrow WCKD, a corporation experimenting on children to find a cure for a deadly virus. As a WCKD train passes, carrying supplies and prisoners, the train is pursued by two rebel vehicles. George and Brenda are in one car. On the other side, Thomas and Vince create a diversion. Brenda fires at the train's driver, causing WCKD to immediately call for reinforcements. Soon, WCKS guards open fire. George drives while shooting back. As Vince gets his vehicle close to the rear of the train, Thomas hooks a cable and jumps aboard. Vince tries to follow, but a flat tire slows his car down. Vince has no choice but to leap onto the train just before the hook detaches and his car crashes. Suddenly, a WCKD aircraft appears and starts firing at George's car, forcing him and Brenda to flee for their lives. Meanwhile, Thomas and Vince, on the train's roof, see WCKD soldiers coming after them, so they quickly jump down. Vince plants an explosive while Thomas holds off the WCKD guards. When the bomb detonates, the WCKD soldiers are thrown off, and the rear carriage is separated from the main train. At the same time, the WCKD aircraft continues to chase George and Brenda. They stop their car and pretend to surrender. When WCKD soldiers get off the aircraft to arrest them, they fall into a hidden trap. Suddenly, a large group of rebels emerges from hiding and surrounds them, successfully capturing the aircraft. Back at the train, a large number of rebels come out of hiding. Newt quickly uses a torch to cut a container from the carriage. Just then, WCKD soldiers storm in. They open fire. Thomas and his friends try to stay calm and shoot back. Meanwhile, the captured rebel aircraft FLI's in drops a hook and lifts the container that Newt just cut from the train. Thomas's group climbs aboard the aircraft. Shortly after, they bring the container back to the rebel base and free all the prisoners inside. However, Thomas is disappointed to find that his friend, Minho, is not among those rescued. Vince gives a speech to the survivors, explaining that WCKD wants them because they are immune to the virus. The fluid in their brains can be used to develop a cure, but the rebels disagree with experimenting on children. So, they are repairing a large ship to escape the mainland. Thomas asks a rescued boy if he overheard any important information while captured. The boy says the train was heading to a city, which is strange because the rebels thought all cities had been destroyed. George confirms he was there a few years ago. It's called the Last City, WCKS main base of operations. This means attacking it is nearly impossible. However, Thomas remains determined to rescue Minho, but Vince disagrees. He refuses to risk the lives of all the rebels for this mission. Just then, they hear pilots talking over the radio. The rebels quickly turn off the lights and hide. Outside, WCKD aircraft are patrolling but find nothing. However, they get closer to the rebel hideout, forcing them to evacuate quickly. That night, while everyone is asleep, Thomas tries to sneak out alone to save Minho, but Newt and Fropen catch him and declare they're going with him. Meanwhile, Minho is horrified to wake up in the glade. The place where he lived during the experiments. He sees a group of boys in the distance, but when Minho shouts, they don't respond. Then, Minho sees another boy run by and decides to follow him into a hut, only to find himself in a mysterious hallway. Suddenly, a door opens, and a monstrous creature known as a griever appears, forcing Minho to run. He finds himself in a maze, full of complex paths and many dead ends. Meanwhile, Minho hears people talking about his test results and occasionally sees hallucinations of doctors examining him. Then, suddenly, Minho's body freezes for an unknown reason. He tries to resist a mysterious force pulling him up to the ceiling. A griever grabs him with its claws and roars. Minho screams in terror, but then everything suddenly vanishes. The entire event was just a simulation created by WCKD in his mind while Minho remains in a lab. The simulation was designed to stimulate his body to produce a certain substance, allowing scientists to extract his blood while he faces another danger. Elsewhere, Thomas's group is traveling through a pitch-black tunnel. In the silence, they encounter zombie-like creatures known as cranks. They try to avoid them, but suddenly, a horde of cranks appears and starts banging on the car's windows. Thomas and his friends have no choice but to speed away, but then a crank jumps onto the front of the car and starts smashing the windshield frantically. Frightened tries to shake it off, but instead crashes the car, causing it to flip over. Luckily, no one is injured. Everyone quickly works to open the doors to escape, but a crank chases them closely. Frightened shoots it down before it can reach them. Thomas's group runs forward, but stops short when they find the exit blocked by a large horde of cranks. Frightened tries to shoot as many as he can, but he runs out of bullets. Just then, a car plows into the cranks, sending them flying. George and Brenda arrive just in time. She immediately opens fire on the cranks while the others quickly get into the car. George floors it, speeding out of the tunnel, allowing them to make a narrow escape. Once on the road, the sight before them is the last city. George notices that WCKD has built massive walls, heavily fortifying the entire city. Meanwhile, the head of WCKD is meeting with the board as the public grows desperate for a cure. Moreover, the newly built walls make them even more paranoid. Avor explains she has just received serum from Minho's blood and that a cure will be ready soon. However, the board is losing patience. They want to use the remaining resources to build a safe zone rather than invest further in the experiments. Suddenly, the meeting is interrupted by Teresa, the young woman who once betrayed Thomas to join WCKD. She gives a speech about hope and sacrifice. Her words convince the board to agree and allow the experiments to continue. Back with Thomas's group, they arrive at the slums. Outside the city walls, the entire area is filled with large groups of protesters demanding help from WCKD. Meanwhile, Thomas is unaware that the tattoo on his neck is glowing, transmitting his location to WCKD. Thomas's group hides among the crowd, looking for a way into the city. Suddenly, WCKS guards activate automated turrets. Gunfire erupts along with the screams of the people. The crowd panics and flees for their lives as bullets and explosions cause severe damage and kill hundreds. Thomas's team tries to get back to their car, but before they can reach it, a group of masked men appears. They surround and force Thomas's group into a van, taking them to a mysterious location. Upon arrival, George immediately attacks one of the men, shouting that he wants to see Brenda. Suddenly, the man removes his mask, revealing himself to be Gally, a former enemy of Thomas who everyone thought was dead. Enraged, Thomas lunges at Gally, but Newt pulls him back, asking him to listen first. Gally explains he is now on their side and has a way to get them into the city. Gally also reveals that another rebel faction is planning to retake the city from WCKD. He then takes them to meet Lawrence, the rebel leader, a man whose face has been disfigured by the virus. Lawrence must constantly have a serum fed into his body to slow his transformation into a crank. Lawrence offers Thomas a way to sneak into the city on the condition that he helps with the mission first. Thomas agrees immediately. He and Newt must travel through the sewers with Gally, while the others will wait here as hostages. Before they leave, Newt notices his hand has started to tremble, a sign that the virus is spreading. That night, Thomas, Newt, and Gally sneak out of the sewers and successfully infiltrate the city. Gally notes that the city security is tighter than ever. This means WCKD suspects rebels are hiding nearby. They go to a secret spot the rebels have used to spy on the WCKD building for years, but so far, they haven't found an entrance due to cameras and heavy guard presence. Gally points out Teresa, who is working there, and suggests that she is the key to getting them inside. Everyone returns to the secret base to plan. They agree on using Teresa as their way in. Only Thomas disagrees with the plan. Newt becomes furious and shoves Thomas against a wall. He accuses Thomas of hesitating because he still has feelings for her. Realizing he lost his temper, Newt apologizes and walks away. Thomas follows him, and Newt finally admits that he is infected and his condition is getting worse. Newt then pleads with Thomas to accept the plan. Meanwhile, in a WCKD lab, Teresa injects a serum extracted from Minho's blood into an infected girl. Soon, her condition improves, and she returns to normal. Excited, Teresa rushes to tell Minho the news. However, Minho shows no reaction, as if he doesn't believe the results. As Teresa turns to leave, Minho seizes the opportunity to attack her. He screams at her for betraying their friends and causing so much loss. WCKD guards rush in to restrain Minho, injecting him with a sedative to calm him down. Before Minho passes out, he manages to secretly palm a metal clip. Shortly after, another scientist brings Teresa back to the lab, where she discovers the treatment has failed. The girl who had recovered has now turned into a full-blown, rabid crank. That night, as Teresa walks through the city, her eyes catch sight of Thomas hiding in the crowd. She follows him into a deserted alley. Thomas stops and turns to ask her directly if she ever regrets what she did. Teresa pauses for a moment before replying, sometimes. But she says she would still make the same choice. Suddenly, Gally appears from behind and grabs Teresa. They then take her to an old church used as a rebel hideout. Thomas and his group begin questioning her about Minho. Teresa reveals that Minho is being held on the 3rd sublevel with 28 other prisoners, and the only way in is to use an authorized fingerprint. Gally suggests cutting off Teresa's finger and getting rid of her, but Thomas quickly stops him, forcing Teresa to help remove their trackers. She has no other choice and complies. While Teresa is working, she notices something unusual. Brenda looks to healthy. For someone who was once infected, she assumes Thomas must be giving Brenda regular transfusions of his blood. But Thomas confirms he only gave her his blood once, a long time ago. This answer shocks Teresa. She murmurs that it's impossible. By all logic, Brenda should have turned into a crank by now. Thomas refuses to say more before Gally leads Teresa away. She secretly steals a piece of gauze with Thomas's blood on it. Afterwards, Thomas's group disguises themselves as WCKD soldiers, with Teresa leading the way. They enter the command center and pass through the checkpoint without suspicion. When they reach the fire escape, Gally begins installing an electronic signal jammer. While waiting for the device to work, Newt starts coughing heavily. Teresa glances at him, shocked. She realizes immediately that he is severely infected. Once the device is installed, Lawrence's group successfully hacks the city security system. They then rush down to the sublevel and quickly take out the WCKD guards before freeing the prisoners. However, they still can't find Minho. Teresa quickly checks a computer and finds that Minho has been moved to a lab on the opposite side of the building. His physical condition is extremely weak. Another blood draw could kill him. Thomas and Newt have no choice but to force Teresa to lead them to Minho, while Gally stays behind to try and open the serum vault. As they enter an elevator, Jansen, Avor's right-hand man, happens to get in with them. Luckily, he only chats with Teresa. He mentions reports of Thomas being seen outside the city, but as soon as the elevator opens, Teresa starts arguing with them. Thomas removes his mask to confront her, but just then, Jansen appears. They try to use Teresa as a hostage, but she pushes Thomas and Newt into a bulletproof glass room and locks them inside. Teresa claims she did it to help WCKD capture the rebels and reminds Jansen they need Thomas alive. The alarm blares throughout the building, and Jansen quickly calls for backup. Meanwhile, Gally manages to open the serum vault and quickly leads the prisoners to the parking garage, where Brenda is waiting with a stolen bus. She notices Thomas and Newt haven't returned. Gally tells her to wait in the bus to protect the kids while he goes back to help Thomas. However, WCKD soldiers storm the garage, leaving Brenda no choice but to drive the bus out with the rescued prisoners. Back in the building, Thomas and Newt, trying to escape, run into Avor, but before Thomas can pull the trigger, Jansen and his WCKD soldiers swarm in. They are forced to flee again, firing at the guards blocking their path to clear an escape route. Meanwhile, in the lab, Minho hears the commotion outside. He uses the stolen metal clip to stab the scientist guarding him, then takes out the guards in the room and injects another scientist with a sedative to ensure no one can stop him. In the hallway, Thomas and Newt are still fighting WCKD soldiers, but their ammunition is running low. Newt throws a grenade to take out the remaining guards, but at the last second, a soldier blocks their path. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out, and the soldier falls to the ground. It turns out Minho saved them. The three of them don't hesitate and quickly escape the building. Jansen and WCKD soldiers are still in hot pursuit. They run into a room with a thick metal door to hide, but the soldiers start cutting through it with a saw. The three decide to break a window and jump into a swimming pool below. Luckily, they survive without serious injury. As they climb out of the pool, WCKD soldiers surround them again, but then the unexpected happens. One soldier turns his gun on his own comrades and then removes his mask. It's Gally, who has returned to save them just in time. The scene cuts to the street. Brenda is trying to drive the bus as fast as possible while being chased by WCKD vehicles. She manages to shake one car, but others are still closing in. She swerves into a narrow alley, but has to stop when she finds the way ahead is blocked by WCKD forces. Brenda quickly jumps out of the bus and fires a flare into the sky. Frypan, waiting on a crane, sees the signal and immediately lowers a hook to the middle of the street. Brenda wastes no time, connecting the hook to the bus before jumping back on. Frypan pulls the crane up, lifting the bus off the ground, but the momentum causes it to swing wildly before it smashes into a nearby building and is flung over the city wall. The immense weight of the bus starts to break the front bumper. Frypan has to quickly release the chain to soften the impact. The bus crashes hard onto the ground before flipping onto its side. Fortunately, no one is seriously injured. Meanwhile, Teresa takes the blood-stained goods to her lab for analysis. After carefully examining the results, she discovers a shocking truth. Thomas's blood doesn't just slow the virus, it can eliminate it entirely. Teresa rushes to tell Avor this news. She stresses that they must find Thomas, as his blood could be the key to a true cure for the virus. Meanwhile, Frypan and Brenda let the rescued prisoners back to the rebel base, only to find it empty. The base has been abandoned. Lawrence has taken his forces to rally the people in the slums, declaring, "Tonight, we take back our city." He stands on a truck loaded with explosives, heading towards the city as an angry mob follows in a great procession. WCKD soldiers see this movement and try to activate the turrets to stop them, but the system has been hacked and is unusable. The soldiers decide to open fire on the crowd with machine guns. However, nothing can stop them. People's Army. Lawrence accelerates the truck, ramming the entrance gate. The explosion echoes everywhere as the giant wall crumbles, creating a huge breach, and the crowd immediately storms into the city. As for Thomas and his group, they are trying to escape the building while Newt's condition worsens. They find themselves facing WCKD's riot police, forcing them to find a hiding place quickly. The entire city descends into chaos, with explosions going off continuously. The turmoil forces everyone to find a way out as fast as possible. They take shelter in a building. Thomas quickly contacts Brenda, telling her to escape for her own safety, but Brenda refuses. Suddenly, George and Vince fly in with an aircraft to pick up the surviving kids. Brenda begs them to go help Thomas. When Thomas sees the aircraft hovering over the city, he and his group immediately run towards the meeting point. However, Newt's condition has deteriorated so much that he can barely walk. Thomas has no other choice. He decides to let Minho and Gally escape with the serum while he stays with Newt. With a trembling hand, Newt gives Thomas his necklace and begs him to leave him behind, but Thomas refuses. He lifts Newt onto his back and runs. Meanwhile, Teresa uses the city's public address system to make an announcement. She confirms that Thomas's blood is the key to curing the virus and that they can still save Newt's life, if only Thomas will come back. Teresa's words make Thomas hesitate. Back with Minho and Gally, they successfully reach the aircraft, but getting back to Thomas, he remains frozen, torn between wanting to continue escaping with Newt and wondering if he should trust Teresa's words. Suddenly, Newt's eyes open, but he's not the same. He has turned into a crank and lunges at Thomas in a frenzy. The two fight. Thomas tries to avoid harming his friend, but when Newt regains his senses for a brief moment, he begs Thomas to kill him. Thomas still refuses. Newt apologizes and tries to use his gun to end it himself, but Thomas quickly knocks it from his hand. However, the madness takes over again. Newt attacks Thomas. Left with no other choice, Thomas pulls out a knife and, with great sorrow, stabs his best friend. Shortly after, Gally and Minho return with the serum, but it's too late. Thomas refuses to get on the aircraft. He stands frozen, his eyes filled with rage, before turning back towards the WCKD tower. When he arrives, he finds that Avor is still alive. Avor confronts Thomas, telling him she can save everyone if he's willing to sacrifice himself and let WCKD use his blood to synthesize a cure. Thomas stares at Avor with a resolute gaze before dropping his gun and offering himself up to produce the serum. On one condition, WCKD must release all the children. But before the deal can be finalized, a gunshot rings out. Then, Avor collapses to the floor. Jansu was the one who pulled the trigger. He gives Thomas no time to react. Jansen quickly injects Thomas with a sedative. He then ties him to a bed in the lab. When Thomas wakes up, he finds himself still tied down, with Teresa collecting a sample of his blood. Jansen stands nearby with a smug smile. He explains that the serum extracted from Thomas's blood will be used as a cure, but only for the elite. Then, Jansen picks up a syringe, preparing to inject himself with the serum. But in that moment, Teresa grabs a glass bottle from the table and smashes it over Jansen's head, knocking him to the ground. She wastes no time and frees Thomas. However, Jans recovers faster than expected and lunges at Teresa. The two fight viciously. The situation escalates until Thomas has to intervene, but Jansen eventually manages to pull out a gun. He aims it at Thomas and Teresa, but before Jansen can pull the trigger, an explosion rocks the building. The WCKD tower is hit by rebel rockets. The massive blast sends Jansen flying violently against a wall. Thomas and Teresa waste no time. They quickly escape and head towards a holding area filled with cranks. A low growl rises around them. The cranks begin to close in bit by bit. Teresa looks back at Thomas and sees that he is seriously injured. From the explosion, blood is seeping from his wound uncontrollably. Despite his heavy injuries, Jansen isn't dead yet. He finds the two of them. Teresa tries to buy time, talking to Jansen to distract him while Thomas uses the opportunity. To throw a nearby object at the glass door, cracking it. All the caged cranks sense the escape route. They lunge at the door, and in an instant, it shatters. The horde of cranks immediately swarms Jansen. He screams and tries to fight back, but his body is ultimately devoured by them. Thomas and Teresa run to the rooftop, only to find the building shaking violently, on the verge of collapsing at any moment. Teresa looks around, knowing their chances of survival are now almost zero. She turns back to Thomas and says, "I'm sorry." Thomas kisses her one last time. Just then, the rebel aircraft FLIs in above the building. George tries to land, but the raging fire makes landing nearly impossible. Teresa doesn't hesitate. She pushes Thomas towards his friends waiting on the aircraft. In that same second, the ground trembles and the WCKD tower collapses rapidly. Before Teresa can jump aboard, her body disappears with the building's wreckage. Thomas watches as she is consumed by the rubble. Before he can react, he loses consciousness. Soon after, the survivors board the repaired ship and set sail for an island. They settle there, building homes and starting a new life. Thomas wakes up, his eyes still blurry with exhaustion. He clutches Newt's necklace tightly in his hand. He examines it and notices a letter tucked inside. Thomas opens the letter. It's a final message from Newt. Newt thanks him for everything he has done, along with a final request. "Please, look after everyone for me that night, under the moonlight." All the survivors gather around a large stone slab. They use knives to slowly carve the names of those who have passed, as a symbol of remembrance. Thomas sits down and carves Teresa's name before walking to the shore. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small glass vial. Inside is the serum. the potential answer to everything. And that is where the movie ends. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you never miss an update. Thank you.